Welcome everybody. I'm Amy Zare, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, and we have our friends presenting with us today. This is the second in the series for our parent coffees on our new instructional materials, which we're very excited about. Last week we did an Ike Ross crossover for Into Reading, which is a Houghton Mifflin product. And this today we're talking about Wonders, which is our 3rd through 5th grade series. And that is a McGraw-Hill product. And some of us probably remember McGraw-Hill when we were youngsters. They have been around forever, and really so has Houghton Mifflin. Our 6th through 8th is also going to be a McGraw-Hill product. That's Study Sync. And so we're going to do something at the end of the week with the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders too. But today we're going to focus on the 3rd through 5th grade materials. We're going to talk about our process and go a little bit in depth of like what the student's day looks like and the materials that they're using. But feel free to stop anytime and ask questions to any of us. First, while I have people here, I always like to talk that we are a Title I school. Each one of our schools is a Title I school. And by that, it means that we have a certain amount of low-income students that generate extra federal funding. And each school is about 30% low income, so it generates some extra funds. We didn't use any of those funds to purchase these materials today, but those we are required to have tell the parents about that. So every time I can, I say, like, well, just so you know, we have a Title I parent meeting. With us getting federal funding, we have to have high quality instructional materials. It's a requirement. And we get audited on things like that every couple of years. We're supposed to provide, and which we do, support to students who are academically the most at risk, and that's through our MTSS process and our TI process. We always want parent involvement and input. This is part of the process today. And we have an annual evaluation of our Title I programs, and we try to communicate to parents as much as possible. And as I said before, based on our funding, we are able to have school-wide plans. Some people with lower numbers of low-income students, they have to have a targeted assistance, but about 35% allows us to do school-wide, so we can support all the students, even though many of the students might not be low income. It generates enough funds to support almost everybody in the school. And I think we always try to do a good job of making sure we're involving parents and making sure they're our partners in education. So there is a parent involvement portion of any Title I funding that we try to make sure that we're involving you guys. Also, we have a curriculum review cycle, and Lisa remembers that I met her first at our math cycle. So a long time ago, which was when it was school year 1920. That's when we had our first like kind of parent meeting on the new math materials, and it's been a while, and pandemic happened right in between it, so that was fun. But we have to have like a series of a cycle that we review the standards. Number one, it's really hard to teach from new materials all the time, so we try to make sure that our teachers stay sane and there's really one focus area at a time. You remember we had last year we had incorporated Second Step was the new, but then we have new art, music. Some of those don't really touch the classroom teachers as much, but more the music teachers, the art teachers, the PE teachers. They have upgraded their curriculum around the same time. We always do that the year before. So this school year, we're going to be diving into social studies and revising those standards. There are standards from kindergarten through 8th grade that we'll be taking a look at, and looking at the instructional materials we use for all grade levels, and so that's really exciting. But this was put down to the bottom because now we have the new materials. Now it's about implementing those. Any questions on that so far? So here's the numbers as it relates to our ELA work. It took a lot of years. We actually started in 2019 looking at the standards. And as many of the folks in the room knows, we are all about standards and making sure that our students are rising to the level of those standards. We do it in different ways to differentiate for English learners. We do it for even special ed learners, but here's the standards, and we work together to differentiate for those, how to reach those standards. So we started studying them in 2019. We had 37 teachers of wide variety on our committee. We had special ed people, we had reading specialists, we had classroom teachers, we had bilingual teachers. Everybody, obviously our administrators were part of that group too. They were all part of the learning and choosing of the instructional materials, because guess what, the worst thing in the world that somebody can do is choose some materials from the district office and push it on teachers. That's kind of a no-go. That doesn't really work ever. So it's a really big committee, but it was all worthwhile. We had 30 hours of professional development and collaboration for committee members. We had 12 publishers that presented their curriculum materials to us. We studied 3 shifts in the ELA planning, which I'll talk about in a minute, and that's what drove our process. And 2 different presentations already to the whole staff reviewing the shifts and literacy best practices. There's a lot that goes in before we get to the actual implementation of the materials. So I talked about before that there's 3 shifts that as the standards came out, they talked about 3 shifts all the time. And how are those different from maybe when you guys were going to school? One is text complexity. They wanted to make sure that the creators of the standards wanted to make sure that the students were always exposed to grade level and beyond text. Because what has happened, they did a big long study in the past that the textbooks and the materials were getting lower and lower and lower and easier for students. And therefore, kids were going to face like the SAT or the ACT, and they were having a really hard time reading that. Or they were getting into high school and struggling to read, the algebra or history textbooks. So one of the revamping of the standards was making sure that we expose our students to text complexity, even in kindergarten. And that starts with like a read aloud at that age, and a very strong focus on phonics and phonemic awareness. But always that exposure, because you never want the kids to encounter some text that like they just can't learn how to tackle that. So part of our job is to make sure that there is exposure to that. And everybody here hears me on my soapbox all the time. A lot of times we have these little readers, which we'll talk about, and they play an important part, and those are usually at the student's level. Sometimes students are higher levels, sometimes students are lower levels, but part of the shift was, I'd say about 10 years ago, all of the teaching was done at those, at their level all the time. And they were saying, no, you can't do that all the time. You have to expose them to the higher level text, at grade level and beyond, and do some of that. So like that's one of the major focus areas of text complexity. 2, you've probably seen it in the homework and everywhere, is evidence from the text. Where did you find in the text that it says that? Because whether you're making an assumption about something or you're making a prediction, that prediction should be based on something. It shouldn't just be grabbed magically out of thin air. It really should be, there should be some sort of evidence from the text. Was it a picture? Did you see it written in line 2 where it said that? So you'll see a lot of the questions that the students are facing. I was like, where did you find that? And it goes back to like kind of what we were talking about with science earlier. There is you have to do some research and find the evidence even within the text, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, of where you found that information. And 3, I was just speaking off camera before of it's all about building knowledge. So you'll see a wide variety of fiction and nonfiction materials. We want our kids to be smarter about the world and more knowledgeable about the world. And in prior years, it was like all literature or fantasy stories and really nice. But now nice literature mostly. But now it should be a balance. They say 50-50 should be informational text and literature. And a lot of times we try to connect them of, like if you do some sort of nonfiction book about woolly mammoths or something, there's some literature story that goes along with it, and you're supposed to be able to make some connections with that. They're going to be asked to do that on our state tests. And so we want to have those kinds of fiction, nonfiction connections. Any questions about this so far? Or do you see anything like this happening so far on what you're seeing in the homework? Or we're just starting out so far, so you probably haven't seen too much of this just yet because we do a lot of routine setting and different, not just routines of like how we act in the hallway, but like routines of like how we do centers and groups in the classroom. So we're just diving into this right now. But have you noticed anything like this?
Well, I just noticed that my children are always coming home with graphic novels, and I'm wondering where is the literature.
Oh, yeah. Is that from the library maybe?
Probably.
Yeah, because they're able to self-select in the library, so yeah, that's probably an interest. You're like, I always had a talk with my students when I was a teacher that you want to balance your reading diet. Like, yes, you can have some graphic novels, but make sure you're grabbing some informational text and
Mrs.
things.
Strong at Ross, the librarian, she's normally really good about if a kid comes up with 2 graphic novels. She's normally like, okay, take one, go get a different book. So and I'm sure Mrs. Yeager does the same thing. So they really do try to help them, yep, that's what you want, great, but let's not pick 2, let's pick something else. So.
And we also try to balance what they check out between what their reading level is and what they enjoy, because there are some kids who their reading level might be up here, but there's a really good book that's a little easier that they haven't experienced. So we kind of really try to work with the kids to balance that.
Yeah, that's good that you're noticing that. The other thing kind of weans off a little at the 3rd through 5th grade level, but it's still there, is foundational skills. And foundational skills like run the gamut, and they're the underlying piece to anything you can do in reading and writing, and that is, the spelling, and that is vocabulary, and all sorts of word work. Phonics is, you'll see a heavier balance on K through 2, and that's why they have a different program, because the teachers felt like they had a stronger foundational skills piece in K through 2, and if you don't have the phonics or phonemic awareness down and all of these solid structures in which to build the foundation to read, we're going to have problems later on. So our foundational skills is really prevalent, but it's not the only thing. You still have to do exposure to grade level text and beyond, and differentiate with other materials. So it's just a shout out to say that foundational skills are one of the, you're hearing it more in the news too, of like people really focusing on that, because I guess during the pandemic that's really hard to teach that remotely. So luckily we had some pretty good success in bringing the kids back and getting them in front of us, especially our really young ones. And also, prior to the pandemic, we had a focus on blended learning and making sure that that learning can continue beyond just what's happening in the classroom. Like, are they doing some reading at home? Are they able to access some of the textbook at home? So long gone are the days of like, oh, I forgot my textbook at home. Like, oh no, you have your iPad. There's no excuses there. So we had already had that focus before the pandemic, and then we kind of became pros at blended learning through the pandemic. So that continued to be part of our process. So these were some of our committee members that have, as you can see, we have some of, teachers from all of the schools, all of the grade levels represented. Not only that, we had to go back and survey all the rest of the staff, so everybody had a chance to have input. They brought it back to their teams and have some input because, once again, it's a huge process, and making sure that everybody is on board teaching it is really important to make sure it's successful. So now we're going to get into like the fun part, the actual materials and describing what we have here and what you might see at home. And there's definitely going to be things you don't see at home, but what's happening in the background. So I'm going to turn it over to my friends here to help us out with that. And here's some grade level. We have something from 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and this could be hands-on so you can see all the stuff.
All right, so we're going to start with just the components of the Wonders program for 3rd through 5th grade. So our first component is comprehension. So within the program, students are working on their oral reading comprehension, which is listening to complex text and then diving deep into the author's craft and skills and strategies, finding text evidence, using their oral reading comprehension. They are also using their independent reading comprehension within it's usually a 2-week cycle for each kind of skill and strategy focus. And during that time, they have a paired reading, a shared reading, an anthology, and also their independent reading with their guided reading and their self-picked books. So they have a lot of opportunity for independent comprehension. And then they're working, during all that kind of oral reading, independent reading comprehension, they're working on a set of strategies and skills and applying them to each of those different kinds of texts. And then along with that, they also are practicing their fluency, where we're looking for pausing at the end of sentences, reading with expression, also their rate. We want that to continually increase along with their comprehension. And then we move to word work. In 3rd and 5th through 5th grade, we really work on our vocabulary skills, and not only are we introducing new content words, but we're also introducing strategies to conquer vocabulary, like using context clues, identifying homographs. We are also working with 4th grade this week on idioms, how those can be tricky. It says something, it's not what it literally means. Working on those kinds of vocabulary skills. And along with that, we're back to including spelling in our literacy block. Our spelling focuses on a specific pattern, word pattern, letter patterns, repeating that through the week and practicing. We've incorporated spelling sorts so they can learn and kind of refresh their memory on those phonics skills of short vowels and long vowels and blends and stuff like that. So we're kind of taking what they did in the younger grades and now applying it to their spelling.
And there's differentiated spelling lists that go with the program.
Yeah, so
So
there's
which is
challenge
really nice.
words, review words. And then for writing, we're really working on the writing process. Through the 2 weeks, we start with just introducing the type of genre and showing an example of a mentor text of what it looks like to write a personal narrative where they can really dissect it and kind of see a good example of it. And then it goes through the 2 weeks of brainstorming, identifying a topic, creating a beginning, a middle, and an end, all those good techniques, transition words. It really works all through the process with them. And then we also are exposing them to all the different writing genres. So, for example, 4th grade, the first weeks 1 and 2 was doing informational text, and then their writing for that was a personal narrative. So they're taking and combining those two when we're talking about combining the fiction and nonfiction per unit, we're combining them. So it kind of exposes them to not only are you reading different genres, you are writing them too. And then we also pull in the grammar. For the grammar, we're starting with just basic sentences. Both grade levels are doing a lot of sentences, fragments, run-ons, writing compound, complex.
Kids don't like write like that.
No. No.
They never write with run-on sentences.
No, never, or fragments.
No.
Just refining those skills so we can incorporate it into the writing process. And then the last area is research and inquiry. And this is just combining their reading and writing skills into like a project or a product at the end. Fourth grade right now is doing natural resources and just nature. And their project is researching a national park and giving information about that and making like a travel brochure for it. And then also then the public speaking is when they take their written, what they've learned and what they've written and being able to communicate that to their peers and whoever their audience could be.
I love that because that is just like, that's what we're talking about. Like you might learn these very unique standards in isolation, but really putting them into practice, combining them through research and inquiry, and then presenting to your colleagues, or their peers, is I think a really important piece. And that's something they can use for life. So whether you have a little scientist or a mathematic person in the room, they have to be able to present and speak to their colleagues. So I like how that's tied in.
And the program does a really good job of combining the reading and writing, which I'm very happy with. It gives them a ton of opportunities to read something and then respond by using the evidence, going back into the text and looking for evidence and referring to that in their written response. So they have a ton of opportunities to practice that, which they do a ton on all the standardized tests, and it's just preparing them for that for the future.
And you'll probably notice that a lot of the questions, depending on the reading, and I don't know if we're gonna get into it, but sometimes they do multiple reads of a story, because the if-then statement is, if it is sufficiently complex, you should try to have like a basic understanding first. We might ask a first layer of questions, like, do you have a basic understanding? The questions get deeper and deeper and more complex as you go through reading the stories, and that's why the level of questioning builds as you go through the
It's
stories.
typically like 3 reads, definitely at least 2.
The first read is usually applying the skill or strategy. So for example, 5th grade's big skill was cause and effect, and they were reading a narrative nonfiction on Theodore Roosevelt and him going to, pass the law where they preserve all the national parks. And as they were reading it, it was all cause and effect. So all the first read questions were more cause and effect related. The second read was more author's craft. Why do you think the author did this? How did the author include us? How does this help the reader? Those kinds of questions. So they get more complex, and the levels of it kind of scaffold. So it makes it a lot deeper. And now that they've reread it, they can kind of see all those things by the time they're there.
And they'd likely, after they ask author's craft question, like, why do you think the author chose to paint the picture this way with, his words? You'll see that in the types of writing that they're asked to do those types of things, or, it's recommended to use those types of things within their writing too. So that reading for writing connection you'll see throughout.
And they're gonna get better and better at it as the year goes, because it's new and the routines are new, the expectations are new. And so right now they're a little hesitant to take risks with it, but with the teacher's guidance and stuff, they're gonna get better and better all year.
Questions so far?
Looks really good.
Student materials.
I can start, and then you wanna
That's
go
fine, I
through.
can hold them up right here.
So
Via
the-
Vanna. Yeah.
So the first thing that we have, so that's the Spanish
This is
for 3rd grade. So this is gonna be your literature book, or sometimes they call it an anthology. And so this is what has like all of the, I would say like more whole group, grade level, engaging and rigorous text. And so each child has one of those, and so this is what they will read or follow along if the teacher's reading. And then she can show you there's just a variety of genres as well in those. And then we have the reading and writing companion. So these are the books that they will be responding to text in as well as writing in. And there's a lot of different like maps or graphic organizers and stuff like that that they will use to help them respond to reading. And you'll see a lot of it is talking about going back into improving evidence from the text, which is really nice because they have it right there, so they can just kind of flip back and forth underline stuff and then go back and
It's
write.
great to ask them to underline and
Yeah.
highlight keywords and go back and
They
find
can
things.
mark
in the
it
text.
all up.
And then I'll show you a picture of like the response.
Yeah.
They might answer the book.
Yeah, that's, so they each have, and they get 3 books, so per each unit, there's 2 units in each of the reading writing companions. Yeah, so they get a
here's
pack of 3.
where they do a lot of the reading response.
So it's really nice. I was in a 3rd grade class and we just back and forth, you know, underlining, highlighting, go back to the text, it's right there for you. So it's really nice. And then we also have the leveled readers, so these would be more for like, Dr. Zier talked about more stations, differentiated, level texts. A lot of them are gonna be exactly the same topics, so they look exactly the same, but they're all at different levels. One might be approaching, on, or one might be above. So it just depends where your kids are, and they're fluid. So just because your kid might be approaching right now doesn't mean that come 2 months from now, they're at grade level or even above. So those groups within the classroom are fluid and constantly changing based on teacher assessment.
And there's always a nonfiction and a fiction, so for each one. And for example, like the fiction ones are usually based on the genre study, so for each 2-week cycle, there's a specific genre that they're studying, and then nonfiction will follow that. So they could be fantasy, they could be fables, they could be, it just depends on realistic fiction, historical fiction, just depending.
And we don't have it on there, but that's the practice book. That's more like a Blackline Master for like teachers, but it's just extra practice for like your vocab, your spelling, your grammar,
If they said getting homework,
yeah.
this is where it comes from usually, or
Yeah.
practice.
just extra practice, which can also be differentiated. And then Wonders also does have an online component, where teachers can assign stuff to the students, and then the students have a student portal on their iPad that they go through. Games, assignments, assessments, videos, ebooks, all different kinds of stuff.
So
When
the
they-
students can see the story that they're reading at home too.
Yeah, they can see it, so if they're absent and they know, I mean, the routine is pretty similar, so Mondays are kind of the same, Tuesdays are very similar, so they kind of know what they're gonna be doing. What I do like about the online is when they go to online, there's a little game controller, like an Xbox controller, and it's vocabulary games, it's spelling games, so if they're like, I don't have anything to study for that, they're there for parents to be like, I know you have those games that you can practice anytime. And they even have some of those vocabulary games, where it's about idioms and stuff like that, they have some of those where they have to match, so there's always those available.
So is that all part of the iReady reading? Is all in that same place?
This is Wonders, so it's gonna be in, Clever, so when they go into Clever, where they go into iReady, there's a McGraw-Hill button, and they click on that, and then it takes them to like, it's a very nice for them visual representation of the places they go, like the game controllers for the games, and the bookshelf is for the books, and, they can access everything there.
The iReady is for their own reading path, so that takes them on their own path of where they're at, and then it gradually increases or gives them extra practice in areas that they need.
And that's usually focusing on a skill or strategy strand, like cause and effect, or comprehension of nonfiction. It's a very specific strand, where this is more focused on what we're doing in class for those 2 weeks. And we are trying to expose them to some of the assessments online, because they do take their standardized tests online. So then when they get to those, they're used to the formatting, they're used to the tools, they're used to using that. So kind of balancing the paper assessments and also the online ones, so that they get kind of used to those formats is important.
Especially like 3rd grade, that's their first year, they're taking the state test, which is an online test, and they have to like type in and scroll, and things like that. So we try to have, like, of course, we're book lovers, we love actual books, but also that exposure of, using both, so that doesn't hold them back, or typing online
We wanna
too, because
prepare
there's a
them.
lot of writing that has to take place too, and you have to respond in math and reading by writing out how did you solve that problem, so typing is part of something we actually do in the library class too, because like not only I don't know about you guys, but like I learned typing, and it starts paving the way for the actual ideas to flow on the keyboard, where you know, we are doing like writing on paper too, but also trying to expose them to writing and typing online as well.
In 2-3, I'm not sure if you got, but we got keyboards that will go with the iPad so that they can actually learn to type instead of, you know, sometimes the keyboard on the iPad can be a little hard and you see more of that pecking rather than the actual placement of the hand. So now that we have the keyboards, they'll actually learn.
Fifth grade actually has them attached to their iPads already, and that'll go with them to Mac, and
Yeah.
so that's been really great, they love them.
As we're rolling up the new iPads, they're getting new iPads in fifth grade, and kindergarten gets new iPads. That's when we're starting to introduce the keyboard. Part of
It's
our
like when
world now.
children type like they
Yeah.
text.
Right.
I'm like, what
They
is
need
what's
to-
this?
Well, they're saying, Don, our superintendent says his son has typed papers on an iPhone. I'm like, well, let's just stick to like teaching them the keyboard.
We weren't allowed to look.
Yeah, I really wanna make sure that they're, using all the punctuation and focusing on the craft. Any questions so far of this? We're gonna let you look in, these materials, but, before we do, helping your child, what can we do at home?
Yeah, so we're parents, and so we understand that some, you know, we're at a different advantage because we work in school, so we know when we go home how to help at home, so.
Not that it's easy.
No, and so we're like, what tools can we have you take away from this to help? So we kind of went through and like, the most important is like just read aloud. It's just read to your child and read to your child often. They love it, no matter what age, they still enjoy it. Independent reading, set aside each day some time for your child to read to themselves. And along with that is the questioning. When they're done reading, ask them open-ended questions about their reading. Not, did you finish? Yes. How much did you read? But more like, tell me about, you know, what happened to the character Susie after this happened. Like, be involved in the story, be invested in it.
Ask them about evidence when they answer their questions.
And then just practice, review those spelling words, the vocabulary, those sight words, as much as you can in the car on the way to practice with, you know, just dropping off, waiting in the school line, anytime you can get those in. And then books, just have books available, for a variety of genres. Visit your local libraries, get them just exposed to as much as you can. We even have a handout with some ideas for how to improve their comprehension and fluencies on the back that you can take with you and use.
And I'd say too with read alouds, you know, that's an opportunity for you to read higher level texts with your kids and talk about that oral, you know, reading comprehension. It doesn't always have to be something at their level. That's your opportunity to expose them to that higher level literature.
I know a lot of parents will dangle, like, if we read the book, we can watch the movie afterwards. That's always a great tool. We can have a movie night after we read the first Harry Potter book, which is a difficult text and uses a lot of good reading strategies. But, you know, to motivate them and you know, go ahead and, hey, then we'll watch the first movie after the first book and so
Or
on.
I read to you and then you go in your room. That's what we do. I do a read aloud with my kids and then they each go in their room. They set a timer for 20 minutes and then they have to read books at their independent reading level. And then we talk about what they read. So, couple of ideas.
Yeah. That's good.
What questions do you guys have so far?
Oh, so I came here because I was just wondering why you're changing the curriculum, listening to your presentation, just makes me really respect what you're doing. It sounds awesome.
And, one of the reasons we changed, cause the older series that we used was, you know, not really, remember I talked about the shifts of the standards? It's good, and it's all good literature, and I like how, Leslie talked about, they talk about it, it's an anthology, because there's like some actually really good books within the Wonder series, all of the series, they have like really good literature within there. Whereas like when I was growing up, it was like King on the Swing and like this, you know, not really relevant literature, but they really try to provide rich text in there. This is more up to date, it's more rigorous. Obviously we were doing a great job before, but this is going to help our teachers and our students bring our students to the next level, I believe. So just like we did with math, we've seen a lot of success. with math, as we change the curriculum and it's more updated, more rigorous, this too should prove that our students are gonna become better readers and writers because of it.
It just provides the tools for the teachers to move those kids to the next level.
Instead of doing like more supplemental materials, you know, like as a curriculum, you know, over a 10-year period, things change. And so you start having to pull a lot of supplement materials to keep up with those changes, where with this, the teachers have everything that they need, and that's current.
They're really like the workbooks,
Yeah.
instead of, the sheets of paper.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Lots of
More meaningful.
worksheets and stuff, but the workbook is really nice. And they take that home, do they take the workbook home, or
Most of
or do
it's
they
done
do it
in
during
class.
class?
Most of it's
Yeah.
done in class, yeah.
It's mostly done with the shared reading and the paired reading and,
Yeah,
But at the end of the semester, something, do they come home with the completed booklet?
yeah, I think that's up to the
Probably.
teachers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I would assume, they're not gonna keep it, so I
Yeah.
assume maybe it would come home.
We gotta make room, so.
Yeah.
It's a lot of books.
and all of our, across kindergarten through 8th grade is why it was, I don't know if you guys watched the board meetings, but it's a big, major purchase adoption because it's for 6 years. So now, for 6 years, I'm going to get these same materials, delivered, for all of the students. So they probably take them home or something after they're finished with those workbooks, but the textbooks stay.
And it's amazing how far, I was just in a 4th grade class yesterday, we're already on page like 34. And it was like crazy that we've gotten that far already, but that shows you how much we're doing with it and how much text there really is and reflection and stuff, so.
And 3rd grade just kinda dove in last week, so they're probably not as
We're
far, so if you
a
have
week
some students at Ross, the teachers really dove in last week to the curriculum, so that's where they're at.
Yeah, but please take a look at anything if you'd like to see it. You have
And we'll be around, we can talk, and obviously our principals are here for other questions.
So the